procession of law enforcement has now begun through the city of Boulder. You can see this live look from Air Tracker 7 of all of the police lights as they drive away from the scene, away from that King Soopers. Really such a somber and moving occasion that none of us wish that we had to ever witness. I covered an officer-involved shooting in the past where that officer was ultimately killed outside the hospital. One of the more moving things I've ever felt, watching dozens and dozens of police vehicles from all different municipalities, all different cities, all different towns. We know that at least 15 different authorities responded to this King Soopers. You can see the officer who was killed ultimately in that ambulance with a police car in front of it, ultimately likely heading for the coroner's office out there in Boulder County. This procession, given the amount of police response, will likely stretch for a very long ways. So as we asked you earlier, Boulder Police have told us to ask you, our viewers, to stay at home and stay inside if you can, as this was still an active scene. Though there is no public safety threat, ultimately this is the priority on our roads throughout Boulder County this evening as police officers do their best to honor their fallen brother or sister here. The one confirmed death in this shooting that Boulder Police called a tragic loss of life. We know multiple people were killed. Our law enforcement sources tell our chief investigator, Tony Kowaleski, that that number is at least 6. Police did confirm that at least 1 officer was killed, and that is the reason why we are seeing this procession winding its way through Boulder. We also told you throughout the day just how many law enforcement vehicles there were that responded to a situation like this. We saw Denver, Aurora, Jeffco, sheriff's offices from all over the metro area, near and far, responding. All of those cars that were posted in front of that King Soopers, now that we know from authorities that there's no longer an active threat to public safety, all of those vehicles will be a part of this procession, this somber night that none of us ever wanted to have to deal with. We will learn the identities of this officer and of the several other people who were ultimately killed, but now this is the way that police officers can pay their respects. We will likely see this again as we have a police officer funeral. Another thing that none of us here at Denver 7 ever want to bring you or ever want to cover, but tonight, on a night that was simply a sunny day at a grocery store in an afternoon, now turns into a night where police lights fill the sky throughout Boulder as this law enforcement procession winds its way, leading the body of that fallen officer ultimately to the local coroner's office. We will continue our coverage here on Denver 7 in just a moment, including more harrowing sound from a witness on scene and more visuals, both from the air and on the ground, of this procession following this deadly mass shooting in Boulder. Welcome back, and thank you for watching this special edition of Denver 7 News. You have been looking live at a procession of law enforcement vehicles, fire engines, and that ambulance carrying the body of a fallen Boulder police officer who lost their life today in a shooting at a King Soopers on Table Mesa in Boulder. This law enforcement procession stretches 4 miles as Air Tracker 7 will eventually pull out. They are slowly leading in this solemn procession that is a tribute and really kind of a tradition when an officer ultimately loses their life in the line of duty. Our law enforcement sources tell our Tony Kowaleski that this officer, this Boulder police officer, may have run back into that King Soopers in a heroic act trying to save lives after police originally responded to a shooting in the parking lot. That shooter ultimately going inside the King Soopers and continuing to take more life. We have learned from Boulder police that there were multiple casualties here. Law enforcement sources tell us that that number is at least 6. We will continue to follow this story and get any new developments from Boulder police as soon as they become available. Just a few tidbits of information we do want to pass along from Boulder police. The district attorney tells us that the investigation is underway, that crime scene analysts are inside that building. They are now processing evidence, that no numbers about the number of fatalities will be released until families are officially notified. The DA went on to say that a reunification center for family members looking for unaccounted or missing relatives has been established at the CU Event Center, that the CU Police Department is assisting with that effort. Witnesses who have not spoken to police are asked to contact Boulder Police at the number 303-441-3333.